Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Madam Toastmasters. Thank you, Toastmasters, and welcome guests. On June 30th, 2009, this man, Bernie Madoff, was sentenced to 150 years in prison for conducting a Ponzi scheme. For 20 years, he had perpetrated a $50 billion fraud on investors in his hedge fund until the market downturn of 2008. The press has reported that Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme was the greatest scheme ever perpetrated in U.S. history. I beg to differ. By far, the biggest Ponzi scheme perpetrated on the American public. It's been perpetrated by this entity, the U.S. federal government. And the name of their scheme is Social Security. Now, a Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent investment activity where new money is required to come in order to pay returns to the original investors, rather than due to returns on the investment assets. In order for the scheme to continue, new money has to continually come in. It doesn't take any more than empirical analysis to realize that once outflows exceed inflows, the scheme is destined to collapse. And this is exactly what happened to Bernie Madoff in December of 2008, when he had over $7 billion of requests for investment redemptions and was unable to honor them. Now, how did Bernie Madoff entice his investors? Well, like most Ponzi schemes, they promise or guarantee things that legitimate investments can't. In his case, he had reported consistent, fictitious returns of 10 to 12%, and had an air of exclusivity about his hedge fund that brought investors in. Now, whereas Madoff's investors were voluntary, there's nothing voluntary about Social Security. The 1935 Social Security Act created Social Security with the noble goal of eliminating poverty of the elderly in the United States. And I must say, over the last 65 years, great strides have been made. Poverty rate among the elderly used to be 40%, now we're below 10%. However, the great fraud perpetrated by the federal government is creating this notion that people are saving for their retirement through payroll taxes. This is a falsehood. Since the inception of Social Security, it has been a pay-as-you-go system. Today's workers are paying for the retirees' recipients through payroll taxes. Now, when Social Security first came into being, the original, or the newest recipients had a fantastic rate of return. Ida Mae Fuller was the very first Social Security recipient. She had paid a total of $49.50 in payroll taxes. During her retirement, she received nearly $23,000 in benefits. Many of the early recipients would receive their total lifetime's contributions to Social Security payments within the first few months of receiving their benefits. Today's young workers will not be so lucky. They will definitely lose money if they are able to receive any benefits at all. You see, in the 2009 Social Security Board of Trustees report, Social Security will have greater outflows and inflows come the year 2016. At that point, they'll be able to make up for this shortfall by doing cash redemptions of Treasury securities that they hold in the Social Security Trust Fund. In the year 2037, the trust fund will be depleted, and Social Security will not be able to meet its obligations unless it does something, perhaps raise taxes like they've done in the past. In order to maintain Social Security as we know it, they'll have to raise payroll taxes from the current rate of 12.4% to 16.8%. Now, I honestly don't believe Social Security is going to collapse. No, unlike Bernie Madoff, the federal government can force the taxpayers of the United States to contribute more money to their fund with the point of a gun. Bernie Madoff did not have that luxury. Now, there are possible solutions that the government can implement. They could raise payroll taxes, reduce benefits, increase the retirement age, or do a partial privatization of the system. Over the years, they have increased payroll taxes from the original 2% to the current 12.4%, and increased the retirement age from 65 to 67. Now back to Bernie Madoff. I wasn't surprised to hear that there were people that were suspicious of Bernie Madoff and thought that he was up to some kind of illegal activity. What did surprise me was to read that there were people who thought Bernie Madoff was engaged in illegal activity but chose to invest with him anyways. You see, they didn't think he was conducting a Ponzi scheme. They thought he was doing something else, such as front-running trades, and without getting into that, somebody else was the victim. So they were more than willing to give Bernie their money, or invest other people's dollars, and benefit from his illegal activity. Now, they chose to bury their heads in the sand, just like this ostrich here. And some might say some of them received their just rewards. Now, whereas Bernie Madoff's victims were people who directly invested with him, Social Security's victims are future generations of Americans who will be saddled with the burden that the federal government has created. Let's not bury our heads in the sand. Let's reform Social Security, make it a self-sustainable program. Just as Social Security has morphed from a social insurance program to a large retirement entitlement program, so should the funding for this program change from a pay-as-you-go Ponzi scheme to a sustainable funded program. And as Grayson once said, I know we can do it because we're Americans, not Americans.